when you bring up something uncomfortable and you're honest, they don't like it. It doesn't feel good in the moment. And they equate that, they basically tip the paint can over and just paint you with that color.
Right? Like the only person affected by that lie is your own self.
So like using protection, nobody's actually getting hurt. Is that what you would consider a white lie that only affects you? At least until the point where that might be discovered.
Well, with a few caveats, there's no like individual circumstance that can really zero out trust with somebody. And it's fear that keeps people from doing that, because it isn't the fear that like you have to have a maybe what could be a difficult conversation possibly. It's fear of overreaction, because people tend to just dial it up to 100 all of a sudden.
Honesty has a lot to do with trust, right?
True. Yeah.
That's what we consider to be like the bedpan, like what we base our level of trust on is.
Wait a minute.
How often?
Bedpan or bedrock?
Oh, bed. To another kitchen sink microscopy. I am Casey Rochford, and we would really enjoy it if you would like and share, and most importantly, of course, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another exciting episode of Kitchen Sink Microscopy.
Exactly. And if you want notifications about new episodes we've uploaded, hit that little bell and leave a comment if you want to, because comments are really important. Keep the conversation going, as we always say. I hope, by the way, I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget we write our own music, which is available on such places as iTunes and Spotify and other music getting places. So stick around to the end of the episode to hear a new song, and check out our website at ksmvidcast.com for news, information, and more. Yeah. So, Casey, what are we going to talk about today?
I think it would be interesting to take a little philosophical dive into the old adage that honesty is the best policy. Like, is it always a good idea to be honest?
Wow. Yeah, that is, that's a very complex topic. It kind of depends on the situation, I think, and the gravity of whatever fact is either being concealed or revealed. The idea that, I guess, what do they call it? Like white lies, right? Just to something that doesn't really matter that much.
Well, there are instances where something can matter a huge amount, and it might make sense for you to create a whole lie around it. It's sad that it comes to that, but as an example, I'm thinking of, and this isn't so much nowadays, but like being gay or whatever, you create this whole persona that you're not gay, and you have your secret life or whatever, just because you could be beaten to death. And actually, I mean, that has happened in recent years, so
well, yeah, I mean,
stuff
society,
like that, like preservation of life,
yeah, because here's the thing. Well, and that does actually kind of go along with a white lie, right? Like the only person affected by that lie is your own self generally. um, and so does it matter if people think something different than what is real, if it doesn't actually matter to them? Well, like, well, take relationships, like, you brought up, right? If it's not a white lie if you went to, me being poly, um, uh, let's say you went and got a STD test, right? And you came up positive for something serious like HIV or whatever.
Mhm.
And your partners are like, "Oh, hey, how'd the test go?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's totally clear. We're all good." Like that's not a white lie. That affects other people.
Right.
And those are the kinds of cases that's kind of what I'm saying. It's circumstantial. Like, in those cases, the honesty is the best policy.
Now that is actually an excellent point. I'm glad you brought up, because I feel like that's probably one of the biggest causes for lies, honestly, because if you are honest with people and upfront about it, there's a staggeringly high chance that you're going to miss out on a lot of sex. People are probably going to be like, oh, back away, find an excuse, like you'll probably run into a lot of situations where you are honest and open, thinking that that's going to be good and right, and everything will be hunky-dory, and then you get shat on, and that kind of creates this idea, kind of like the Pesh policy of truth, where it's like, if I want to have something nice, I'm going to have to lie about this, is basically beaten into you, or not
Yeah.
beaten physically, but like.
Well, yeah. It's drilled into your head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, that affects other people.
Right.
Those kinds of situations, and it isn't just something that's innocent, right? Like, yeah.
But with protection, a lot of these things could, feasibly be, no real worries at all, like
Well, let's just
vanishing
say,
vanishingly small statistical odds,
sure, but let's just say that your relationships with people didn't involve that.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is more of a broader kind of concept, really, that applies to a lot of things. But like, you can, let's say you say, "Oh yeah, we're all in the clear, everything's good," and you continue to have condomless sex with your partners, knowing that you just tested positive for HIV. or
Mhm.
or say, like, the COVID thing, right? Like, you went and got a COVID test and you're positive, but you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to my grandma's house and hang out," and she's like, "Oh, how'd the COVID test go?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, it's all good. Yep, totally negative, everything's fine." It's so,
Yeah,
like,
kind of
is it,
skirting that line between like attempted manslaughter, maybe, and
well,
like,
yeah, it's
yeah.
putting other people at risk, or putting other people in harm's way of some sort, because it could be something just emotional or whatever. um I was, I won't tell the story because I don't, and my coworker probably doesn't want me to talk about it, but he kind of dealt with something kind of similar about something he didn't, something in his past he didn't want to reveal, and did, and it was taken the wrong way. But that's the thing, that's another thing. Like, let's say there was something in your past um that you've put behind you, and maybe it's uncomfortable, and it's not necessary for it to be known to other people, but let's say you do reveal it. Is it right for somebody to, well, I don't know, like, it is it okay to not necessarily conceal, but avoid telling somebody things that are inconsequential to them and maybe to your own relationship, in the interest of just preserving the peace, right? or
Mhm.
or, or keeping things from getting all complicated. I mean, it's kind of the same thing as like, you know, concealing the fact that you're gay, right? Like society doesn't accept it at that point in time, like in the 50s or before or whatever, till you go way back in time, and then it was totally okay. Um, it, it like it doesn't matter to anybody else. It, you know, ignorance is bliss, right?
So in that regard, what do you think of, you know, and I think this still applies to you as a poly person, just because honesty is supposed to be kind of the core of all of that, right? So
Yeah.
let's say you're cheating on some, like, and in your case, that would be like not disclosing that to your partner. But you know, you use protection and everything. And it's just you kind of have an idea that they probably wouldn't like personally like that person, but you do. And you want to pursue that or whatever. So like, using protection, nobody's actually getting hurt. Is that what you would consider a white lie that only affects you, at least until the point where that might be discovered?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a very interesting thing to bring up. I mean, it wouldn't matter to anybody. However, like just in general, like if you had revealed that, but if the harm comes from being oblivious to that for a very extended period of time, and then suddenly realizing like, oh, hey, wow, this person's been seeing this person for like 5 years, and you know, they've been going to family events and hanging out, and I didn't even know their name. I've never heard of them. And the kind of hurt that somebody would feel when all that could be avoided by just saying, hey, you know, oh yeah, there's this other person. And yeah, man, that's a, oh, I've got a lot of thoughts going on right now.
Yeah, like that there's damage to the trust and all that stuff, which I've been thinking about doing a minute microscopy on trust, actually, but it might be kind of a good spot to talk about it, because you know, honesty has a lot to do with trust, right?
True. Yeah.
That's that's what we consider to be like the bedpan, you know, like what we base our level of trust on is,
wait a minute,
how often, how,
bedpan or bedrock?
oh, bedrock.
Is that a Freudian slip there?
I was thinking hard pan and then bedrock. Yes, the honesty is where we shit.
This is totally going to the beginning. Oh man. Well, I think trust is something that in itself is okay. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here, because I had thoughts about the other the previous things we were talking about. But you know, trust is something that isn't like, it's something that's built over time, like consistent history of being truthful and being honest builds trust. And people who trust blindly, like, oh yeah, I just trust that person because I don't know, whatever, they follow the same political party, or they like the same band or the same sports team as I do, they must be trustworthy, right? Yeah, that person likes Depeche Mode, of course they're honest.
Well,
but
so I mean, I understand that, and I know that's how we build our, you know, resume or CV with that particular person. You know, like, oh, I've known Eric here for over 20 years, and you know, we've got a very strong established trust or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, when we first met, were we like, I'm not gonna trust a thing Eric says at all, you know, like it's yeah, you know, you have to like allow some give there, right? Like,
sure,
otherwise you're completely antisocial, you know.
Yeah, and you should start on neutral ground, right?
Yeah,
Like
and it's like,
you don't know
most
one way.
people yeah, most people aren't going to screw you over. So, I mean, like taking a chance on people is, I don't know. I feel like people get burned a lot and then they think everyone's going to do that to them and they
Well,
just close
and
off.
that's a thing. Because I was going to talk about what would be called antitrust, I guess, like the where you have experience
Skepticism.
is, yeah, exactly, you have experiences with certain people, right? Like, there are people like, oh, I would never trust a Heather, right?
Right.
Or I it's like, or, oh yeah, I don't ever go to this store because whatever, because I went to that one place that one time and like they screwed me over, so I'm never going to any of the other places. And it's like, well, that's also kind of, that's ignorant, really, and an oversimplification of the situation, and certainly not giving people chances to make mistakes, because people do,
Right.
and that's something trust. To me, I see the world in shades of gray, like fuzzy logic. There's no, well, with a few caveats, there's no like individual circumstance that can really zero out trust with somebody. It can diminish it severely or increase it to a great degree, but it'll never bring it to 100 or 0 ever. Maybe over fuck, like, what, 50 years of experience, I think you can kind of come to rely on somebody as being a certain way until they get Alzheimer's and they start losing their mind, and all that goes out the window. Um,
My parents were always kind of like that, with the restaurants and stuff, like, oh, we had a bad experience there. We're not going back ever again. I'm always like, those cooks may not even work there anymore, or that server or whatever, whatever caused your bad experience was circumstantial and, happened in the moment or whatever. But the biggest one I remember, growing up as a kid, was that coli thing that happened with Jack in the Box in early 90s or whatever. um my mom was so freaked out by that um that I, she didn't let me eat hamburgers for a couple of years or something, and we never went to Jack in the Box. Like I didn't go to Jack in the Box until I was old enough to like drive there myself. Like,
wow.
but I was always thinking, like, they were honest about this. They came out and said, hey, this was a thing that happened, be on the lookout. And then I'm like, that was probably the safest place to eat at that moment in time, because they're going to be extra careful.
Oh yeah,
And
they
they were
were under
honest
the
about it.
magnifying glass at that point.
Right. So I was like, if anything, you should be going to Jack in the Box instead of other places, because they probably cut the same corners that Jack in the Box was cutting at the time, So
Yeah, oh, that's a
it's a
really good
gamble.
point. Well, yeah, and it's kind of something that's fairly common, like with risk assessment, that things that are sensationalized or really big tend to seem like all encompassing, like they're so prevalent, it's everywhere, right? Oh my God, mad cow disease, right? Oh, don't eat any beef at all because mad cow disease. But like, look, when you actually do the research, like, what are your odds of actually getting, like, having any kind of connection with that in any way? Like, it's almost nil. And so it's like, well, it's a matter of weighing risk versus reward and all that stuff. And but it it's not something that people are very good at doing innately. Um, it tends to kind of like go all the way this way or all the way that way, and it's actually kind of feeds back into the whole trust thing. Like, um, wait a minute, I had a point. If it's because one of my core mottos, I guess you could call it, is always assume best intentions.
Mhm.
And I try to remember that. It's like a little mantra in my mind, right? If I start getting agitated about something and I start thinking somebody's doing something I don't like, or they're being um, mean or something like that, I go back to that and like, hey, wait a minute, always assume best intentions. Like, what's really going on here? Why would somebody do this? Are they just a dick, or are they doing it for different reasons? But that's not how we're conditioned to behave. it's almost like assume the worst always. Somebody tells you
Yeah.
something. Oh, well, it's kind of like, it goes back to right earlier, like 18 minutes ago or ish, 17 minutes ago. Telling a partner that you're, well, maybe, okay, well, whatever, it's
However
15
long
minutes.
ago.
Yeah. Telling a partner that you have another partner or something like that. And it's fear that keeps people from doing that, because it
Mhm.
isn't the fear that like you have to have a maybe what could be a difficult conversation possibly. It's fear of overreaction, because people tend to just dial it up to 100 all of a sudden, because they assume, oh my god, this is like, it's got to be the whatever worst thing I can imagine, this must be what it is. So that reaction is so common that people are hesitant to be honest about things. And that's something in the poly community that is being worked on. I guess people constantly work on that, like dealing with uh, those kinds of situations in logical, sensible, rational, and calm ways, right?
Mhm.
um, but it's something that is very lacking in the wider world, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just nothing's black and white is the problem. And
Yeah.
it's great to have uh it's great to have mantras like honesty is the best policy, or always assume the best intentions, but there's always going to be a situation where that may not work. One of my
No,
mantras is simply my favorite mantra is don't be a dick unless it's absolutely necessary or it's really really fun. um
yeah.
no, but
Well, you
things
should,
like that, they've always got exceptions.
yeah, you should be a skeptic, of course. Understand that things are never black or white. They're never 0 or 100 or 0
Yeah,
or 1, depending on what mathematical construct you adhere to. Um,
I mean, like a healthy skeptic though, like not
Balance.
right. Yeah, like, I mean, how do you think there's like a time limit on how long it takes to truly get to know someone?
Uh, I think it's experiential. Like a time would be difficult, because it's like, if you only hang out, let's say you had a friend you only hung out with like once a year, right? And maybe you spent
Exactly.
a few
Yeah.
hours together, but you've known each other for 20 years. And then you've got another friend that you've hung out with like every day for the same 20 years. Well, which has more weight in terms of understanding the other person, like you understanding each other? It's the amount of time spent together that really allows for that, because you've experienced everything.
Well, what if
Um,
it's even like someone you hung out with every day for 6 months? Like you've only known them 6 months, but you've hung out every day. You've had hours and hours of conversation every day, and you just like had this data dump of each other, right?
mhm.
And then you've got that friend that you see once a year for 20 years or whatever. Like, yeah, like how do you put a time stamp on
I,
something,
I don't think you can. And even then, like, the thing is, it depends on what experiences you have. If you're
Yeah.
only like, if you just hang out and you're all you have is going to Sherry's every night with the 6 month friend, right? And all you have is, oh, we go to Christmas every year with the 20-year friend. Um, I don't think you've even like they're not even like comparable at that point. Because it's like, what experiences have you had? What have you done? The
Mhm.
things that really show somebody's true personality are struggles, like going through hard times. And it's not all the fun and games that illustrates somebody's who they really are.
Yeah, that's a
it's
good
it's
point.
the tough stuff,
Yeah.
like struggling and things like that. That's what really brings it out, I think. And so if,
Yeah.
that, so I don't think it's like I guess not really like a quantifiable thing in that sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, measuring someone's character based on how they handle a conflict
Yeah.
is probably one of the best metrics, I suppose, for
Well, and even conflict with each other. Like
yeah,
you and I have had conflicts about stuff,
yeah,
but it's like, you know, and it's interesting seeing the evolution of that, how like it began as completely primitive and stupid in the early days, but now it's like so uh you know, if we have a conflict, well, we really don't really have
we always discussed things though,
yeah.
and that goes back to the honesty, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we weren't stewing, you know, letting something just kind of fester or whatever, you
Yeah.
know, like we would always hash it out. And that's probably why we got nothing done at the business, because we were constantly arguing.
That's true. Oh man.
Making paper airplanes or whatever. But,
Mhm. Exactly. But you know, that's a rebuilding experience too, like being able to do those kinds of things. But yeah, certainly discussing stuff, sitting down, having, you know, a sit down when you have a conflict, and just talking it out and not raising your voice and not taking things personally.
yeah.
um
But I mean, that's the trouble, isn't it? Because so many people, when you bring up something uncomfortable and you're honest, um, they don't like it. It
no.
doesn't feel good in the moment. And they equate that, you know, they basically tip the paint can over and just paint you with that color, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's something that's really important in conflict resolution. There's this kind of inherent tendency to like want to resolve something, or have your way be seen and understood in the moment, you know, especially when emotions are high.
Mhm.
And I think that's harmful. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know, let's take a break, let's sleep on it, come back, talk about it tomorrow, you know, maybe we'll have some revelations in our dreams or something.
Right.
um and work through it, because that's the whole thing. There's that, like, you know, don't let the sun set on what is it, the, like, if you have an argument or something, you know, don't
Don't
let
go
the
to bed
sun.
angry.
Yeah, exactly. And I say go ahead, like, fine, do it, because you'll wake up having, you know, dreams. The sleep process, you work through uh problems from the day,
Yeah.
and maybe you can come back with a little more level-headed uh approach, I guess, and talk it out. But it's that whole drive to like, oh, we got to fix it now, you know, I got to be right, I got to get the last word in or something like that. That's bullshit. It's exactly why things go south, you
Yeah.
know, like, and because they're really, other than your own lifespan, or whoever you're having a conflict with, their own lifespan, there's really no time limit. Like, what is there, like a timer up in the sky saying, well, you must resolve this before this time? Like, no, you don't. You resolve it when you do,
Mhm.
if you do, hopefully. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how, I mean, it's unfortunate that so many conflicts tend to go south, right?
Hmm.
Because that creates that negative reinforcement of honesty, like I was mentioning earlier, where you basically have all these um mile markers in your head of like, oh, last time I was honest about this, it ended really badly, it got really ugly, maybe I just don't say anything now or something, you
Well,
know. And it's like,
yeah, and that just, it's self-perpetuating.
mhm,
Because, you know, you conceal one thing and nothing happens, so you conceal another and another and another, and then the lies add up, you know.
yeah,
And
then your life gets really complex because you're trying to remember, whoa, how does that lie apply to this situation? How should I respond to make the other lies fit this lie? You know, like
yeah,
it's all
exactly.
all wacky. Yeah.
I think a healthy amount of honesty is good, especially when it matters. You know, if you're living in the 40s or something, it's like someone's like, "Oh, are you gay?" Yeah, you probably want to lie about that, because it doesn't really matter. But you know, something involving a bigger thing, right? That like, oh, did you do that thing that caused that accident that killed 100 people? It might seem like a good idea to lie about it, but maybe just coming out and just being like, yeah, I fucked up. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that, and people should be forgiving of people when they're honest about that kind of thing.
Ideally, yeah.
Well, and because the thing is, like, put yourself in the other person's shoes too. You know, like,
yeah.
there's I don't know.
So I've had I've had situations where I've been like, you know, super transparent about, I mean, I'm pretty much an open book. Like that's been my kind of my core value for a long time, is just like put everything out there so I can just be who I am without trying to, you know, because, you know, you've got like multiple selves, like, you know, and this is still true of me to this day. Like, you know, I'm a different person with my family than I'm with my friends and stuff. And it's hard to break out of that. But
sure.
that's me trying to break out of that so I can just be my genuine self more often, you know. And there's been lots of situations where I've, you know, been you know, like for instance, like forward with my feelings for a girl, but we're like friends or something, you know, and I'll be like, look, I understand, you know, you're with so and so or whatever, and I have no intention of ruining that. I just think maybe you ought to know that, you know, I have an attraction for you. So if I ever start acting inappropriately, you don't feel like you can't come to me and say, hey, let's not cross that line or whatever. You know, just as kind of like a preamble to, you know, like head off any kind of problems that pass. And it's always ended badly. You know, like they always just like vanish, you know,
Well,
and
and
then I lose a friend.
that's not a problem with being honest. It's a problem with how people react to such things, I
Well,
think.
exactly. But you know, like that's kind of what got me thinking about this whole topic, was like that makes me that, like your initial response to that, because you feel bad that happened, is like, well, I screwed up because I brought up something that ended this friendship now. And maybe it never would have ended, but maybe it would have gotten really complicated or really hard on me or hard on them or whatever. You know, you can't really know the future, but you know, that honesty ended a friendship in the here and now, and it's a bad feeling. So it creates that loop, you know.
You said hard on. No, that's a good point. Yeah, it kind of sets a precedent basically, and continually reinforces when you try something and fail at it. It diminishes the I guess the incentive to do that again,
Right.
because it ended badly when you did it last time, and then you think, well, that was an isolated incident, right? So, well, I'll try it again, and it badly, it and but that I think that's no reason to give up on being honest. I think in general being honest is good, like, or up front at least, right? You know, you don't have to be. What's that scene from oh god, if YouTube wasn't all a stickler on copyrighted stuff, I'd throw in that clip from the Goonies, where Chunk gets grabbed by the Fratellis or whatever, and they're like, you know, ask him tell us the whole story or whatever, and he just like starts crying and spilling the beans about his entire life. Like, well, back when I was 6, you know, you're like, okay, you probably don't have to do that every single time. Like,
Right.
it's a matter of measuring out what information you divulge and when. Like, you don't just have to say you go on a first date with somebody, right? You don't just have to, you shouldn't start at the beginning and tell them all of the gory details necessarily. But if there's something important, you probably should. You should be upfront long before that. Like, you know, if you have an STD or something, or I don't know, like something important, something that matters, right? That people would assume isn't a thing. You know, or maybe you've had like surgery, you know, maybe you're trans and you used to be a woman and now you're a man, or a man you used to, or now you're a woman. Like, that's important to people. Like, they should know that stuff. It may
Yeah.
seem inconsequential to you, but it could matter to other people, so they should know in advance. Or I mean, there's probably all kinds of things in that, like, revolving around that concept.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say that, you know, it's one way or the other. And I think people's mileage will vary, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess it really depends on like what it is that you're being honest or not truthful about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're, but that's, you know, that's all, of course, you know, what
Wait,
you
say
think
that again.
may not be a
It's
big
all
deal.
what?
I said it's all subjective,
Oh,
because what you think is not a big deal might actually end up being a big deal to the other person. So
that's true.
it's really
And
hard
that's
to,
something where, like, both sides really need to have a little bit of forgiveness and understanding, um, realizing
Mhm.
that things are subjective in that regard, and that, you know, maybe to one party it didn't seem like a big deal, um, and you know, you shouldn't overreact if somebody's like, oh, I didn't think that was a big deal at all, you know. I didn't think you cared that I like onions and eat them all the time. And they're like, but I'm allergic to onions, it'll kill me. Like, well, I didn't know that. You know, why weren't you honest about being allergic to onions? You know, like, it just, the thing is, like, chill out. It's going to be okay. That's the sort of thing. Like, if you start getting emotional and start getting agitated, that's the point where you should start getting skeptical and calm down a little bit and start asking questions.
Yeah. I
And
guess that
it's
kind of
really
ties
hard to do.
into
That is, we're not
oh yeah,
trained to do that.
I think that kind of ties into our, I guess it was one of our live streams about perception and reactions, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, like it's really all in how you view it and how the other person views it, and whether or not those things are compatible. That's not the right word. If they're on the
Well,
same wavelength, you know.
yeah, and that's an important thing, is to understand that people see things differently. They may look at it from a different perspective. They may have different experiences, all kinds of different things. So, like, everybody should be understanding of that fact. And like, okay, if, because I've had people that this kind of brings up something that like is one of my pet peeves. I'll say something, and or whatever, you know, people put words in your mouth, like, oh, well, you meant this, and I'm like, no, I didn't. I said that,
Mm.
and that's exactly what I meant. Like,
Yeah.
why? Well, but that's what you meant. And I'm like, well, if I meant that, why wouldn't I say this? Like, it's so
Right.
infuriating.
And you can't convince them otherwise.
No, but it's because they're looking through their own lens. They're saying, like, my perspective is the only perspective, and anybody else, they must be wrong, right? Like, but that's not how the world works. It totally doesn't work that way. And understanding that makes life a lot less stressful. Um, it, yeah, like it, if somebody says something, especially if they're being genuine about it, like, oh yeah, well, when I said that, I meant this, right? Well, you should just accept that. Because if you think that what they say isn't what they say, then what's real? Is everything they say a lie? Because I don't know.
Well, as a bit of a devil's advocate, which is especially weird because I don't always think that this is really a thing, but that is kind of an open door for gaslighting.
That's true.
In the sense that, like, if you say, oh, I've stepped on a hornet's nest here, you could just say, well, what I really meant was the opposite of what you meant.
Well,
and you just compound the problem at that point. And
that's true. And I guess, learning to recognize signs of gaslighting or such things is a valuable skill. And also communicating on a regular basis is very important, because if somebody starts behaving erratically, like very different than they would normally, or saying things differently, then you can recognize that. But it's like open dialogue, regular communication, building your own communication skills, those are all really important for getting along with other people. And
yeah,
but we're never that's not something that is part of the curriculum of life.
right. Yeah, I mean, I like on the gaslighting thing, I think it's important that people are able to apply that critical thinking, because it's like gaslighting is a situation where you're trying to be convinced of something that's a fact not being the fact, right? Like, oh, that girl's phone number you found in my cell phone, that was my cousin or whatever, she was just calling on somebody else's phone or something, like something that is super fishy sounding, that could be factually checked, that's probably gaslighting. But if it's like your interpretation of something they said, that's probably not gaslighting. That's probably just perception.
Well, yeah, and that's a really complex topic. We should actually do an episode purely about like things like gaslighting or dog whistling and stuff like that, because a lot of people think it's very simple and obvious. But here's the problem: like, if you've done your research on Wikipedia about gaslighting, right? You're like, oh, that's exactly it, right? And then all of a sudden, now you're a conspiracy theorist. You're going down the same path as those people, like making connections where they don't exist, assuming the worst, and you're back. Well, you're probably worse off than where you would be if you didn't go down that path.
Yeah.
So
it's also a confirmation bias. You're looking for anything that supports your immediate reaction to that.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Oh, I feel like this was a bad thing. I'm going to look for anything that's going to support that feeling,
unless it points to me as being the source of the problem.
Right.
That's the thing. It's always somebody else that's the problem.
I feel like episodes like this are probably like better than like a session with a therapist. Like I feel like people could really learn a lot from just like talking about these things on that meta level and examining them, like
exactly.
And just having, like one of my other mantras is like, I'm always a work in progress. So I'm always trying to examine my behaviors and my, mental like ruts that I've created and see if I can adjust and make things better. And
Yeah, it's like Kaizen, right? That I was actually going to do a minute microscopy about like Kaizen for humans or something, that like that is something. And I do the exact same thing, like constantly self-evaluating, like, does this make sense? And asking questions about myself and comparing things, and yeah, but that's again a skill that is learned and not something that's typically taught, sadly.
yeah,
But we should be doing that because, yeah, we're all a work in progress. Like, I don't think there's never ever a point where you're like perfect. You've never like reached the pinnacle and now all of a sudden you're the Buddha or something. Like it doesn't work that way. Especially because the world is always changing around you. Society is changing, technology is changing, everything's changing. You're changing. So it's important to constantly reevaluate the state of things and your place in the world and what you know and stuff like I guess your playbook or something. Um, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, huh.
Actually,
That's
so
hmm?
I I,
Oh,
I
go
want
ahead.
I wanted to go back kind of because the full honesty thing like got me thinking about Star Trek TNG,
Uh-huh.
Betazoids, right? Like their entire, in my understanding, their entire planet, they're all uh, telepathic or clairvoyant or whatever, um, and everybody can know everybody's thoughts at all times. Am I right on that?
um I don't know if they ever really got super deep in that. I almost felt it was like they could feel emotions, um, uninhibited. But as far as the telepathy, I thought that was like a projected thing, like they could talk to each other, you know, send messages, but I didn't think it was like they just read everything.
Well,
Um,
maybe,
but
of
I
course.
could be wrong.
And Deanna Troy was, yeah, like as far as Betazoid to Betazoid, I think that was implied that maybe they ever, it was kind of like the what's the little pool from DS9 with the changelings and everything, like the
Oh
collective.
yeah.
It's not called the collective, it's the something. I haven't had enough beer. But it's sort of like everybody, I guess it's more of a thought experiment, regardless of whether it's actually canon in Star Trek TNG. Imagine a planet where everybody knows everybody's thoughts, all the intimate
Yeah.
details, no matter what. Like, you can't
There's a
conceal
movie
anything.
coming out about that, actually. I,
Huh.
I saw a trailer for that. Like some girl like crash lands on a planet and all of a sudden you can hear everyone's thoughts, and
Whoa.
they were like trying to escape a bad guy, but bad guys can hear your thoughts, and like
Whoa, that
so
would be interesting. Hey, wait a
I mean
second.
that's the thing, right? Like if everyone can hear your thoughts, there is no deception.
No, that's true. But concealing your thoughts is part of like the human experience, I think. Part of
Yeah.
your own personality. Like maybe you don't want everybody to know about that time you pooped your pants in sixth grade or something like that. Like, it, although maybe if everybody did, it wouldn't matter.
if
And
everyone could read everyone's thoughts, no one would trust anyone.
ooh, oh damn, that's deep. Wow,
I mean,
yeah.
honestly, like nobody's perfect. Everybody lies, and everybody's done something they probably regret or feel shitty about and don't want to get out into the public. But if everyone knew it, all of a sudden there would just be people being like, well, so and so did this and this and this and this, you know, like,
well,
people always make lists of the bad and they ignore the good stuff, you know?
Well, and here's the thing, like, how would diplomacy work at that point? Oh shit, how would politics work at that point, right? You're running for office and you're like, I'm gonna do this, I will work for you, right? And like everybody knows you're lying. Like nobody would ever get a vote except for the guy that's like saying exactly what everybody knows he's thinking, or she, or they, or whatever. Yeah.
But would they? What if what they're saying is genuine, but they don't like what they're saying? Yeah.
You would know that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a deep topic. Uh-oh. Got a little bit of a glitch in the system right here.
Sometimes honesty isn't everything. Sometimes just yeah.
Wait, you just like glitched out for a second there. Oh. Oh man. Okay, so that I think we've got a kitchen sink situation here. Oh yeah. The NSA definitely doesn't like what we're talking about right now. Oh shit. Oh no. Yep. Well, okay. We talk about politics and all of a sudden things start glitching. Uh-oh. Wait. Okay.
Back. Yeah.
Kind of. Okay. Uh-oh. Well, fortunately, I think we're kind of at the tail end. I guess the internet gods have brought down the hammer and decided for us when this is going to end. Yeah. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this conversation, and of course, keep the conversation going down in the comment section. And if you have thoughts, maybe we'll bring you on the show and we'll talk to you. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone, if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see you though, but that's okay. Well, thanks for deep sea diving.
Turn my video off to try to help.
Yeah, it's working. Well, I think we've gone far enough for tonight. So yeah, thanks for deep sea diving with us into this topic, and check out the song on the way out. It'll be a good one, I hope. And, have a good night.
Every time the seasons change, haunted natures go insane. That's why I'm running high. Anytime the wind is blowing, anytime I feel it growing, I run for your heart. I got hopes that I can fly, reach above to touch the sky. Now I know where I'll be going. Anyway, the wind is blowing. Gotta find the reasons why you and I should have a try. Gonna find the brand new start here within your human heart. Feel my beating heart.